Welcome to Secrets from the Scene, a show for local musicians who want to improve their music, grow their audience, and learn about Minnesota's music scene. If you're interested in talking about all things music related and meeting interesting people from our local community, you're in the right place. Welcome to Secrets from the Scene. My name is Stephen Helvig, and I'm your host. I'm a local music producer here in the Twin Cities, and this podcast is all about local music, and specifically the Minnesota music scene. All of our guests are local artists, producers, engineers. If this is your first time, welcome. Thank you for checking this out. And if you've been listening to the podcast, hey, welcome back. I appreciate your support. Today's episode is going to be fun. It's going to be a good one. We have Siri Undlin of the indie project Humbird, and I'm just really excited to get to meet in person, but also to learn from you. I've got a little bio prepared that I'm going to read quick, and we'll jump into the episode. Humbird recently released their third full-length album, Right On, and for loyal fans and new listeners alike, Right On is a mischievously kind offering, a whole heap of songs that are unafraid to bask in the perfectly ordinary and also excruciating possibility that sometimes we're right, often we're wrong, but no matter what, music can meet us where we're at and keep us company along the way. Well, today we're in good company, because over the last 7 years or so, Humbird has been slowly and steadily learning things the hard way, as Siri put it. But with over 150,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, a growing fan base, and heaps of critical praise across multiple releases of varying styles, it's clear that Humbird has figured out a thing or two along the way. And I'm excited for all of us to learn a thing or two from her journey. Humbird tours extensively, and those miles, they're hard-earned. Siri grew up steeped in church choirs and traditional Irish ensembles that eventually led to conducting extensive folklore and musical research around the world as a Watson Fellow. That work inspired years of DIY touring around North America, including performing around the Twin Cities one backyard at a time during the pandemic. Undlin continues to expand and experiment as a writer and bandleader in a way that is fluid with each season, and oddly suited for this particular moment. Following the surprise success of her self-released debut album Pharmacon and the pensive reflections of 2021's Still Life, Right On is the next iteration in her process of witnessing the world in all its complexity and responding with candid consideration. Please welcome Siri Undlin.
A ghost farm, hollowed out and filled with stars. The sky fell through the busted roof, a hole so wide the moon came to. There's a strange glow in these kind of ruins. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Let's talk a little bit about your background right away.
Yeah.
And let people get to know you for anybody that isn't familiar with your story or your music.
Mm-hmm.
You can be as brief as you want or as in depth, but, just kind of walk people through the meaningful stuff from where it began up till now.
Yeah. Well, I'm Siri and I play music and I love playing music. I started writing songs back in middle school, like 11, 12 years old. And luckily for me, had parents and a family that were like really encouraging and were like, play us that one song you wrote, or like around the campfire being like, Siri, lead us in a song. And music was a big part of the house just because we went to church a lot. My mom was a pastor, so choir singing was a big thing also.
Did your parents play music?
Not professionally ever, except for in church. Like my mom led singing a lot during a service, and she was often plucking out hymns at home on the piano while she was working on planning services.
Sure.
And my aunts play music. And yeah, it's sort of a thing that has come and gone in the family history of people who are like really seriously playing music all the time, whether they were church musicians or playing in bars. And then other folks, it's part of their lives, but not something they do.
Yeah.
Publicly.
What denomination?
Lutheran.
Typical.
Yeah, typical. Yeah, very typical. But yeah, it was a really formative tradition to grow up in, very much about community and singing together. So I really appreciate that in retrospect.
That reflects my early sort of musical influences, was all church basically, because my parents didn't play music and also didn't really listen to music much. So most of it that I was exposed to was Lutheran church.
Yeah.
There's a lot more music than Lutheran church music out there.
Yeah, it's true. It's a good starting point.
It's a starting point. Yeah. Whereabouts is this that you grew up?
I grew up in Edina in South Minneapolis. Yeah, in the Linden Hills neighborhood.
Okay.
My mom's church was in South Minneapolis. She's retired now, but grew up in the Twin Cities, and like a lot of my family, extended family, is here as well. And my grandma grew up like not far from where I grew up. So there's some deep roots in town.
Yeah.
And I've stuck around even though I've left a bunch of times and come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get exposed to music at home and church.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do you start making your own music?
I was like 11 or 12, I think, the first time I really was like, oh, here's a pile of songs. And my aunt put me in touch with a friend of hers who had a studio in his basement.
Oh, cool.
And I recorded songs for the first time and was like so scared to like explore the recording process at all. Like I would play the song and he'd be like, do you feel good about it? And I'd be like, yeah. And then we'd just do the next song. It was awesome looking back on it. But I then transferred to Perpich Center for the Arts for high school and was in the music department there. And I think that was really the sort of jet fuel in my like pursuit of music in various ways, was just being with a lot of kids my own age who were so talented and weird and curious. So that was a big change.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Where is Perpich?
It's in Golden Valley. I can't remember. It's like right off of a highway. I think it's Highway 55 or maybe. Yeah, I'm really bad at directions, but yeah.
That goes through Golden Valley.
Yeah.
So it's close
yeah.
enough.
Okay. That could be right. But yeah, it's an amazing public arts school in Minnesota, and it's available to all kids in Minnesota. They have dorms there. So if you live outside of the Twin Cities, you can like stay there. It's like, it kind of was like Hogwarts for artsy kids, at least when I was there. I don't know what it's like now.
And that was your high school experience?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Junior and senior year.
And then college? I
went out to Colorado for college. I went to Colorado College. Yeah. Studied not music, but I don't know who I was kidding. Would you like to say
anything else about that?
Well, I mean, I studied anthropology and folklore and biological anthropology. And really those things relate to music so much. Yeah. So even though I was like, okay, I'm going to get a degree and I'm going to become an archaeologist, and like music isn't really a real job, so I have to figure something else out. But the whole time I was playing so much music, and any chance I had within the discipline of anthropology, I was leaning into music and storytelling. So it was like kind of a bend in the road that was just leading me to the same place,
Sure.
I think. Yeah.
Okay. You had said, I'm going to get a degree.
Mm-hmm.
There's no money in this or whatever. I can't make a career. Was that an idea that you came to on your own, just from society? Was that something that was sort of talked about with your parents?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where did, that mindset start?
I think it's like very pervasive in our society that you're either like a starving artist or you give up your art and do something else. And I don't know who really said that to me specifically. Actually, my parents were super supportive. Like they let me go to art school when I was 16.
Well, yeah.
And like, yeah. And they were just so excited for me to like be playing music. And I think that made all the difference. But I think what was going on is I actually just didn't really know any professional musicians. I didn't grow up around it. I didn't see it. So I didn't know how it looked.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case for a lot of people with music, is like there's these famous stories even in town of people who are like really successful, but there's this like weird mist around it and you can't really see the gap in between. And I think that's where I was at. And it was really only through like trying to study other things and like going and doing an archaeology dig where I was like, I hate this. Like, this is a bad plan. Like, I should find a way to make music and storytelling my job. I just don't know how yet. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of So when I was in high school, I grew up way southern Minnesota on a farm.
Yeah.
And, I had church stuff, which actually my earliest sort of music experiences were singing in an a cappella group.
Oh, I sang in an a cappella group
really?
too. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Such good ear training.
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe the best.
I think so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because if you can sing the melody, you can figure out pretty much anything, in terms of arrangement. And it's helped me so much as a music producer.
Yep. I think about it all the time because I felt really lighthearted about doing a cappella in college. I was like, oh, this will be fun. And like 15 years later, I'm like, thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God for that experience of singing doo-bops.
So I ended up singing in an a cappella group for 8 years.
Oh my gosh.
I did it through high school and then I did it in college as well because all 4 of us that were in this quartet went to the same college.
Here in Minnesota?
At Hamlin.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. But the 4 of us were in a quartet singing like oldies and barbershop music and that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
And then 3 of the 4 and then 1 other guy were in a punk band as well. So we had
really full spectrum there. Yeah.
It was really like you had the radio, which there was about 3 stations to choose from that would come in reliably. And one of them was oldies radio.
Yeah.
And it was by far my favorite.
Oh, that's like gold.
Oh,
yeah.
So good. And so that was fun. That was fun to do that stuff. But we also sang a lot of church, sacred music and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's usually where you would start performing as a kid, is in churches. But along that way, so I'd been doing that a couple years and things were going good. We were actually like doing shows and making some money and having fun with it. But I was worked on the farm and that sort of thing. And eventually I'd gotten a job that my dad got for me on a concrete crew.
Oofda.
And I was there for like 3 weeks and I had the same feeling of, I hate this so much. I need to find something else.
My soul is leaving my body. Yes. I have to figure something else out.
Oh, it was painful.
Yeah.
I hated every second of it.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to share that story because it was so similar to my own feeling, that realization of when you take some other job or some experience where you're just like, I can't do this. I just cannot do this for the rest of my life. Okay, so you start to learn that. Was the Watson Fellowship attached to that degree then, college, or how did that all happen?
Yeah, it's attached, and the Watson was probably sort of the really sharp turn that I took back to music, because as a college student, I was like, in the classroom in these discussion forums, exploring folklore, doing field research, hearing folk songs, and I was kind of on this academia path of like, I love music. Archaeology isn't going to work, but maybe folklore and fairy tales and folk music and just understanding different cultures and what makes up part of our human experience. And so the Watson Fellowship was a grant to go study those mediums in Northern Europe for a year. And what ended up happening is I was shadowing storytellers and shadowing musicians who were traveling around their communities or around the countries where they lived and performing. And through the course of that year, I was like, oh my gosh, I do not want to be in the classroom. I want to be in the pub. I want to be in the library. I want to be in the backyard. I want to be at the kitchen table. Like, that's where the real magic of these traditions is happening. And there's a place for academia, but often you're taking things apart to understand them as opposed to putting them together to create an experience for people.
Yeah.
So a year of academic research really blew my mind in the sense of I don't want to be in the classroom either, at least not right away. I want to go out there and live life and see the world and interact with people who are different than me and collaborate with other artists. And because I was shadowing people, getting in the car and driving around with them for a couple weeks while they went and performed, I was like, oh, this is DIY touring. It's just different language is often used in Ireland or Norway or whatever, because it's these really ancient traditions. But you come back to the States and you're like, oh, all my favorite punk bands call this DIY touring. So it was a cool sort of connection to make, and totally changed my trajectory as far as what I wanted to try to do.
Very interesting. What a cool experience too, I'm sure.
Totally. Yeah. Insane experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get back. Now, before all of that had happened through, high school and college, were you playing shows or were you just making music?
It was pretty sporadic. as far as playing shows go, but it was happening. I was
Okay.
writing music the whole time.
Yep.
That's just like kind of my basic mental health practice is writing music. It's sort of how I like get through the days. And usually, or like often in seasons of my life where I was more busy, like in college, like just trying to keep up with the workload, there were almost no shows, but occasionally I would make it happen at a
Okay.
coffee shop or an open mic or something. And in high school, because I was surrounded by so many like talented fellow musicians that were really, everyone's trying to find their voice. Like we couldn't get into the clubs because we were 16 and 17 years old, but a lot of coffee shop shows, a lot of like house shows. Yeah.
Okay. So you had already, really started to be a public artist. Because there's a lot of people that take some time to get to that point where they really start, they're writing music a lot and they're playing maybe small, like for friends and that sort of thing, but aren't really saying, hey, I'm going to do a show. So you had already crossed that border at this point. So you get back from the fellowship. Is this the beginning of Humbird then at that point, or?
Actually, I first started a different band with an amazing musician still in town making amazing art, Dexter Nelson. We started a band called Undlin and Wolf, which was kind of like our version of Simon and Garfunkel, I guess. But we did a lot of co-writing together, and that's the band that I first learned how to tour in. Dexter had been living in the Midwest when I was gone, and he was putting together DIY tours and learning how to engineer and produce. And when I moved back to town, we had gone to Purpitch together and we reconnected, and he's someone who's an amazing person to collaborate with. So we kind of hit the ground running.
And he's still making music now?
Yeah.
What's his project?
He releases his own music under the name Dex Wolf.
Okay.
But he just produces some of my favorite albums that have come out recently. Nice. Yeah. Eliza Edens, she's based out of Brooklyn now, but her music, him and my bandmate Pat Keene, they co-produced that. It's amazing. And yeah, he's busy doing cool stuff around town.
Oh,
yeah.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So how long did that project last then?
I think that project was maybe 3 or 4 years of like really working super hard, learning things the hard way. And I was in a period of writing so much, like a lot of music, more music than Undlin and Wolf could really accommodate, just because we were a duo and sometimes a band. And it's hard to learn new music quickly when you're doing everything yourself. And Humbird became kind of a side project where I was putting music that was like weird or didn't quite fit into that band. And then over time, Humbird went from a side project to like a full-blown focus.
Okay, yeah. So at what point did it become the full-blown focus? Was that like debut album, or was it always kind of happening simultaneously with other things?
It was sort of just this like slow grumble that grew, I guess. And I received an artist grant from a studio on the Western Slope in Colorado. It's called Elsewhere Studios. I submitted some of the music, like the really weird stuff I'd been writing, because I was like, this would never get played on the radio. I don't even know how you'd perform this live, but I was experimenting with stuff and submitted it. And they were like, yeah, this is kind of wild. You should come out and live here for 3 months and write music about this valley, about this landscape. So I did that and led some like group songwriting stuff. It was a really cool summer, but I like needed a name because I was doing all this work out there. So that I feel like really was the beginning of the Humbird project being like public facing. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, cool. So it's slowly developing, it's slowly growing. You're writing plenty. Eventually you get up to 2019 and the release of your first full-length record. And it seems like that's where people really start to get to know you as an artist, right? You start getting more press, and I know The Current covers it, and I think they included it in Best Local Albums, right?
Yeah.
Walk people through that. Like what, from getting that out to seeing the initial like reception of that, and what was going through your mind as all that's happening.
Yeah. What was happening? I think the first important thing that happened with that album, before the album even existed, is I sort of sat down with myself and was like, if I could make a record in any place with any person, who would it be? And people maybe know this artist, maybe don't, but I was a huge fan of Shane Leonard's. He had a band called Kalispell and was playing in a band called Field Report. And I knew that he was producing albums in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So I tracked down his email address and sent him a cold email with like one song attached and was like, if I could work with anyone in the whole world, it would be you. And this is the first album I'm making under this name. And I didn't expect him to answer, but he did. And yeah, it like totally shaped the music. He's now one of my best friends and a frequent collaborator. He's produced multiple things for the Humbird project, but he was a stranger and he said yes. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was.
Well, good for you for doing it too.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to send an email and ask. And I think I was maybe just like young enough and naive enough to be like, maybe he'll get back to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he did. And I think like attaching the song, it was a voice memo from my phone. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was like, here's the kind of music I make. Here's one of 12 songs.
Yeah.
Do you like it? Would you want to make an album with me?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So things start to catch a little fire, right? You start getting some following from this. Ultimately, you get some radio support locally, that sort of thing. You get on the road at that point? Were you already doing that?
Yeah, I was already on the road. I had, there were 2 EPs before the Pharmacon album. They remain the weirdest things I've ever done. Like, it'll be like just body noises, like whispering. Like, it's pretty,
yeah, I'm not familiar with those.
Yeah, they're slightly far out, but I was touring that stuff and just with a looping pedal and decided even if I was like embarrassed or felt strange about making this weird music, I was going to do it anyways, which was great like resistance training for when you're making maybe more straightforward music because you're like, well, I'm not making farting noises into a microphone, so this is probably going to go way better. But yeah, I had been touring for a couple years before the Pharmacon album came out and was playing mostly DIY spaces.
Okay.
And had made some connections with really amazing communities in like Milwaukee and Chicago. Yeah, Madison, Eau Claire, just sort of Midwest, going to basements and backyards and playing.
Sure. How did you, I mean, obviously, I know to some extent the answer is it just develops over time, but how did the DIY touring stuff get started? Like, it's one thing to say I've been doing it, but it's a whole other thing to actually get started.
Yeah.
You know, and figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, it is something that just slowly builds on itself, and you just have to be really on top of your shit. Is it okay that I swear on this podcast? Okay. Sweet. Like the first tour I ever went on was 6 days opening up for this band called Rivers, which is an amazing band that maybe someday will reunite. And I kept every contact I got from the place. I was doing these really short opening sets, but made sure I like introduced myself to every musician that was playing that night, got to know the staff at the venue, and like followed people on Instagram and social media. It was mostly Facebook because this was like 2015, 2016. And then like hit people up on Facebook Messenger to do it again in 6 months. And also knowing that I would probably be playing to like 0 people, but still just like going there, staying connected with fellow musicians. I think that was like the biggest thing, to be like, I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. It would be cool to play with you again. And not being annoying and networky about it, but just being like a genuine fan of what people are doing.
Yeah, you're still doing all of the networking, but out of the right motivations and being a good person to be around so that you're, it's more enjoyable for you, but it's also more enjoyable for everybody else too.
Yeah, and you're not like trying to climb some ladder. You're just like stoked to hear your friends play music. And like, that's a magical night. Anytime you can put it together and organize it, that's a win. So just looking at it like that, as opposed to like you're trying to get somewhere. It's like, no, I love this band in Chicago. I really want to see them play. And maybe they're down to like make something happen with me. And like letting the music lead as well. Like the music being the priority and finding good fits of people to play with.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of how this can work, where it doesn't feel like you're grabbing for just opportunity, right? Where if you are truly trying to find the right collaborators, the right community, the right scene that fits your music, then everybody wins in that case, because you can get all the benefits that happen from networking and finding really great bands that maybe are further along than you. But if your music actually fits with theirs, they're benefiting too, because that crowd is going to be happier and you're going to be contributing to it.
Yeah. And just looking at it as cultivating an experience as opposed to building a career. I don't know. I think maybe later on in later seasons, that was more of my focus. But when I was first starting to tour, I was just like, I want to learn. I want to get to know this place. Who are the people making music here? Like, what's going on? That was true in the Twin Cities, and that was true in other Midwest cities. It was just like being an open book and wanting to experience what was happening.
Let's take a quick break so I can tell you about my latest offering for independent artists here at Helvig Productions. As you may know, I'm a music producer located here in the Twin Cities, and I've been running a recording studio for the last 15 years. I've worked with hundreds of local artists spanning pop, rock, Americana, and all the various forms of indie singer-songwriter music. And I know just how hard it can be to finish your own songs. It's easy to get stuck in a death loop of endlessly tweaking things, rewriting sections, or just completely starting over and never feeling satisfied. This is why I've started offering a free song analysis, which I call Musician's Roadblock Relief. If you're currently stuck working on that same song over and over again, I'd love to offer you some ideas that may help. I will objectively analyze your track and offer some helpful possibilities to hopefully get you unstuck and back to finishing that project. My feedback will cover one of the 3 areas where I've seen artists struggle the most. The first one is the song itself. I've had artists come to me wanting to produce a song that just isn't great. But there's no sense in spending money on a bad song because no amount of production or mixing will fix that. You need strong melodies, good lyrics, and a nice flow from start to finish. The second roadblock I see artists run into is bad production. Even if the song is good, the production needs to match the sound you want. Are the sounds right for your style? Is the arrangement too messy? How does it build? Are you doing too much or too little? When all the supporting production elements work in harmony, the song comes to life. And the last thing is mixing problems. Nothing is more frustrating than loving your song, but discovering it sounds terrible everywhere outside of your home studio. Pro-level mixing is hard, and it takes years to master. Mixing problems may be holding you back. If you've wasted enough time in the trial and error loop and are ready to try a different approach, head to helvigproductions.com/fixmysong and fill out my application. That's HELVIG productions.com/fixmysong. I'll take a look at your specific situation, and if I think I can help, I certainly will. It's 100% free and may just be the thing to get you unstuck and back making progress toward your goals. So as you're putting out music and you're writing music, is your goal always to tour as much as possible?
No.
Okay.
It has been in the past, but I've definitely had some just like spiritual crises in the last like year or two of like, oh, like if you tour all the time, it'll come at a really high cost in some ways. And some people are down for that. And I think I have been down for that in past seasons of my life. But yeah, lately I've been like, there's a balance. I would like to find it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But in those early days, that was more of your mindset?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was like just working side jobs here in the Twin Cities and just like wanted to hit the road. I wanted to go everywhere.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Like, how did you manage that? Because obviously the job thing is so tricky for people sometimes. You're just taking side stuff that was flexible.
Yeah, mostly service industry. I think I was really clear on like my favorite thing to do is music. I think I'm okay at it and I want to keep getting better. And the only way that I can become a better artist and a better performer is to do this as much as I can. So I never had side jobs that I particularly cared about. I cared about the people there and I wanted to do a good job, but it was mostly like serving beer, serving pizzas, doing office temp stuff, like garden shops, nannying, just anything that could fund the next tour. Yeah, that was the goal.
Right on. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit to more recent times right now with the third record and that you are now on a label
Mhm.
and have management.
Mhm.
People are always interested in that sort of stuff. I know you get asked this question a lot. So let's break it down a little bit because you've been
Yeah.
fully independent up until that point.
Yeah.
First of all, when did that transition occur?
I would say that transition started to occur actually 3 years ago now when we started working with a booking agent. That was the first
Okay.
person who kind of onboarded to the Humbird experiment. And that was a game changer for sure. But I think that's when the ship started to turn a little bit towards a more like team-based approach as opposed to like me.
Did you go out to find somebody like I need this, or did somebody find you?
It was sort of both. The project had gotten to a point where I could pretty much not keep up with booking. Like things were falling through the cracks. I was doing my best, but it was surpassing what I could do. Like it was more than a 40-hour work week. And it was just the logistics, the advancing of the show, organizing my bandmates, making budgets, doing the booking, sending all the materials. Like it just, I was doing my best. Stuff was falling through the cracks. And I had a friend who was like, I'm thinking about starting a booking agent. Do you want to be my guinea pig? Or I'm thinking about starting a booking agency. Do you want to be my guinea pig? And I was like, I'll take any help I can get. Like, I'm desperate. Like, we're getting asked to do things and I can't keep up with it all. So it was like after 5 or 6 years of things slowly building to a point where I couldn't do it, then someone who wanted to start doing it swooped in and was a superhero, and we learned a lot together because
Cool.
she was building a booking agency at the same time where I was building a band that was actually also a small business. So we learned a lot together. And now she runs a booking agency with a lot of other artists and does a great job. But it really was like around a kitchen table where she was like, I'd like to try this.
What is her agency?
Rowboat Music.
Rowboat.
They're the best. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. Danny O'Bear. She's the best.
Cool.
Yeah.
We'll link her up in the show notes too.
Yeah.
So that was your first sort of outside teammate, was a publicist or a booking agent?
Yeah, booking agent.
Then did you experiment with other services after that? Or like, how did that transition happen to where you are now?
Yeah, there's definitely experimentation that happens. Like we briefly worked with a manager who, like, generally I just try to work with people that I get a good vibe from. That's like rule number one. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best fit long term. So there was a couple publicists, a manager. The person who remained consistent was Danny at Rowboat Music. And as she and I built things up, like she took over booking so that I could do actual management of things. But then also at a certain point, I was like, I'm overwhelmed again by management aspect of things. And Danny being like, hey, dude, you really need to look for a manager. Like, I'm covering more than a booking agent should because you're covering more than an artist should. And it was nice to have someone validating the fact that like we needed a third or a fourth. You know, it was like it was time for the team to grow. And then I looked for like years, like 2 years of cold emails, just trying to find the right person. Yeah, and then ended up meeting our manager, Jimmy Ryan, at a music conference. And he's awesome. And he was down and at a place with his business that he was able to take on a new artist. It was just sort of, I guess at every stage of the Humbird behind the scenes team growing, it has been weirdly aligned and not, I will have like spent months sending cold emails and doing research and just like banging my head against the wall trying to find the right person. And then around the kitchen table in the lobby of a hotel, just like at a bar in Eau Claire. That's where we met a publicist we worked with for a long time. Her name's Karen Wells Verlander. She's amazing. Like it's so frustrating because you work really hard to try to force it to happen. And then in these like fairly relaxed settings, I think if you're putting it out there and you're actually desperately in need of that help, at least that's how it's worked for us. People have like appeared and I'm like, man, you're way better at your job than any of these people that I was trying to get to answer my emails. Like, where did you come from?
Yeah. why couldn't I have found your email when I was doing my research?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But this kind of leads a little bit to, I think, my next sort of question, which is, I got to imagine that by doing the research and by doing the outreach, that also sort of informs what you want in it too, because sure, you're overwhelmed. You go, I need help with this, but you may not necessarily know right away, like what that means, what you need. From what you've known now, I guess, with a little bit of hindsight, all the years of doing it independently, that experience, how did that inform knowing what you need now? And the point of this question ultimately is that a lot of people will say, I just need a manager. Like that would be, but they're really not, they don't need it yet. They need to learn how to do it themselves first. And so with you having gone through that, what about that experience, learning it the hard way and doing it on your own and handling it and getting to the point of being overwhelmed, made it so that when you are ready to get a manager, it can be a successful thing?
Yeah, I think when you're learning how to do it yourself, you learn what you suck at and what you're like really bad at. And when it came to like the sphere of management, there were things that I was fine at. It's like not my favorite, but it's like, I can do this, like whatever.
Yeah.
And then there were things where it's like, I am god awful at this. Like, no one should let me do this. Like, I hope no one catches on to how bad I am at this. And I think like being really honest with yourself about like what you can do, what you enjoy doing, and what you're just actually super bad at is really helpful in your search, because with everyone I've worked with behind the scenes, I've had a pretty clear understanding of what I want them to be really good at, because it's what I'm really bad at.
Right.
I have an understanding of it because I've cried while I figured it out over months or years, but it's like, I know what the job is, and I really, really want to find someone who's good at it and enjoys it. That's the best case scenario.
But most importantly, you know what it should look like. You know what success looks like, versus I think, again, people that aren't quite ready sometimes don't even really know. They just want somebody else to figure it out.
Yeah.
But having been through that, you know what to expect, and you know what then expectations to set for other people.
Yeah.
And that's critical.
Or even just a baseline. I think like part of working with people who are really talented is like they actually broaden your horizons a lot and broaden the scope. And I think, with any of those behind the scenes jobs, when you do it yourself, you're like, okay, this is the baseline. This is the like, it can't be worse than me doing this.
Right.
So like you have to be at least as good as I am at this job. But ideally you're way better, and you're going to teach me a lot, because that's like a collaborative, healthy working relationship, I think.
Are there, speaking of things that you felt like you were really bad at, are there things that you felt you were really good at that you still hold on to? Like, no, that's something I always do.
I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm pretty good at like making friends. Like I like people. I'm not like the most extroverted person, but I love a good conversation. I love hanging out, and I'm a fan. I'm like a genuine fan of people. And I think that like sort of on the ground connections of just being a true listener and like fan of what people are doing has opened more doors for this band than anything else. That's not why I do it. I do it because music gives me hope for the world and reminds me of my own humanity. But yeah, just being out in the world, touring a lot, going out to shows in the Twin Cities a lot, and just knowing people and showing up for people and being like, I'm not just like this self-centered band that's trying to get somewhere else. Like, I really believe in this community. I love this place, and I'm going to show up for it, is like the most important. And I would never expect someone to do that job for me.
Right.
Which it's almost like a sacred practice of some kind. But yeah, pretty much every other job besides the writing and playing music, I'll gladly give up. I really have no... Yeah, it's like, thank goodness. Yeah.
What is the role of your manager in Humbird? And what's the role of the label?
The management relationship I have with Fivehead Entertainment, that's their name. It's pretty new. Like, we've been working together for a little over a year.
Okay.
The same is true with the label. So I'm still learning a lot about that. But I think first and foremost, the role of Jimmy in this band is to like meet me where I'm at, talk about big dreams, talk about tangible goals, the difference between them, and like to make to-do lists, make budgets, make brainstorming sheets of whatever to like make those things happen. And he's great at following up on ideas I've had that I maybe forgot about because I'm on week 3 of a tour and I haven't thought about anything creative for a while, or like checking in on mental health of the band on the road. Yeah, I think the management job is sort of ephemeral and it's like going to be super different depending on the band. But because Humbird is a band that was like moving along before we had a manager, like we're generally pretty scrappy and like self-sufficient because we had to be for a long time. And as a result, the role of Jimmy seems to be like, how do you guys want to level up? Or like, what's your big dream that you haven't been able to do because you didn't have the resources? Like he's, at least for me, he's broadening my perspective a lot and then also supporting bandmates in a way that I wasn't able to as like a person doing all the jobs. I couldn't also like answer every single question or, you know, there's a lot of things flying around and there's a lot of moving parts. It's really fluid. Things change all the time within a band, whether you're on the road or in the studio. And yeah, it's cool to have Jimmy on the team. He's like the safety net in some ways. The stuff that I can't catch or the stuff I don't know the answer to, he's there and he's thinking big picture, like big picture sustainability, which I think when you're DIY touring and you're just in the weeds, often big picture is hard to catch sight of because you're just like, we're just getting through the next 24 hours, actually.
Right.
I just got to get through this merch table experience that I'm about to have, and then I'll think about the next thing after that.
Yeah. Yeah. How often are you in contact with Jimmy then?
Talk when we need to. Yeah. We email a lot. We text a lot. If we haven't connected in a while, every couple of weeks, we have a nice long phone call. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We keep it pretty relaxed, I think. Generally, I think every artist would have different preferences. And
how about the label? What's that relationship look like?
Yeah, I've been working with Network Music Group for a little over a year now, and that relationship is really different and wild than I expected. They, after like a whole decade of emailing labels, like at least 10 a week for like a decade,
Seriously?
Which was, yeah, I had like lists of things I would do, never any answers. Network just slid into my DMs on Instagram and I thought it was spam. It wasn't. It was a cool label that I then emailed with for a while and got to know their A&R team. And they're kind of in the middle. They're not like a big label, but they're not a small indie label either. They're all about like supporting artists, which is wild. Yeah. And it's felt really collaborative and supportive so far. So I'm really grateful. But yeah, check your DMs, I guess, is the moral of that story. And again, I'm like banging my head against the wall for years trying to get someone to answer an email. And then all of a sudden, someone just reaches out. And it's like, really? Is that? You feel kind of crazy because you're like, oh my gosh, I was trying so hard and got 0 responses for a really long time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like the answer people want to hear, that it just appears sometimes.
I feel like that's the most common answer a lot of times. But, you know, at the same time, maybe the emails you were sending didn't lead Network to you. Mm-hmm. But I can probably pretty safely assume that the fact that you had a habit of reaching out and going for it meant that was a part of your ethos for everything else in Humbird that got Humbird to the point where Network reached out to you. You know, you weren't sitting around doing nothing else besides emailing people for help. That was just on the side among everything else that you were doing to grow the band and grow the project. What other stuff like that were you doing all the time?
What was I doing? Well, I had like checklists that I would like do on Monday. And that would be like email as many labels as I can think of and follow up with the same labels 6 months later if I haven't heard anything. That was always at the top of the list. Looking, 6 months out on the calendar, like, are we going to be on tour? What are like the radio stations where we have shows booked? Hitting those people. I mean, it's just mostly, it's like, a full-time job of email and admin. But yeah, booking shows, whether that was with friends through Facebook Messenger, or Instagram, or like actual venues, emails, just sending 5, 6, 7 times in a row until they tell you actually no and please stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just kind of having that checklist of like, here's what's going to happen. What's one small thing I can do that would maybe make it go a little better? And just like applying that to everything, including like email lists, which is boring, but yeah, sending that out once a month. I don't know, just like the really monotonous stuff that everyone can like read about in a music business book. I'm not saying it works. I'm just saying like it's a place to start and you can see what works for you and like lean into the things that feel like they're actually giving you life and or leading you to the things that you care about.
Yeah, what's actually giving you results.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you found in that department that you would recommend to other people if they're getting started?
I'm a huge proponent of like live music and actually getting out and playing. And I think a lot of times there's really talented people who just want people to discover what they're doing online and for their life to change overnight. But it's like, or you could get in the car and do a long weekend of shows that will like maybe mostly suck, but there's some magic on the road and you meet people and it leads to other people. And I think more than anything, what has like driven this band to where it is now is like real life, where it's like, we are going to make the best music we possibly can live.
Yeah.
And the 3 people in this room in Iowa are not going to forget it. Like, this is kind of a brutal night, but dang, if we're not going to play our hearts out. And we still play to very few people in Iowa sometimes. Like, it's not that it changes overnight, even as metrics online change, but just that like ethos of like, no, we're going to show up and play music. Like, that's what we do, leading the way. And it's like, you can do MailChimp, you can do TikTok, you can do all this stuff. And like, you could have a career off of that. I don't know. That's not how I did it. The way that we've like built what we're doing is by getting in the van and like
in-person connections.
Yeah. And as a result, what we've built has been like pretty slow and steady. There hasn't been any like crazy moment where something nuts happened. It's just been like, oh wow, there was 15 people at the show tonight instead of 3 when we were here last time. So it's just like, yeah, sort of excruciating, but also kind of fun and satisfying.
Yeah. Well, as that slow and steady growth happened, at what point did you quit your day job?
Well, I mean, I just had like the most random collection of side jobs that I was like quitting all the time anyways. When we would like leave for tour, they'd be like, you can't do that. And I'd be like, okay, I will find a different serving job when I get back, which is super stressful, but I could do it and I did. And I know that not everyone can do that. I was in a really unique place in my life and I have very little expenses. Like I just lived with a bunch of roommates in dense parts of the cities and did my best. And slowly had to pick up less and less shifts from places I was working. And then I transitioned to working remotely from the tour van. I did some content writing.
Okay.
And like ghost writing, which was its own, I thought it was going to be awesome, but doing a job from the van while on tour, like broke my brain. I slowly dialed that back over the course of like a couple years. And then 2 summers ago, I stopped doing it thinking I would probably be back within 3 or 4 months. I was like, I'm just going to try and see if I can get through this summer, not doing any writing, freelance writing for other people or for companies. And then I've just miraculously, and I do mean miraculously, made it 2 years. Like every month it's like, holy crap, it worked. That's awesome. And just, I know that that's not available for a lot of people, but it was like a slow trickling down.
Well, I'm asking all of this kind of like out of the motivation of, at the beginning of the conversation where you said, when I wanted to be in music and you could see these people doing it, but there's this mist, like I don't understand what's in between.
Yeah.
This is one of the ways that it looks.
Yeah.
It's not the way, but it's also not uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just one foot in front of the other a lot of times. And suddenly you're a little further ahead than you were last year.
Yeah.
And just piece by piece. So along this way, what do you think has been the biggest struggles or like the hardest thing to learn?
I think one really hard thing has been just differentiating between the business side and the creative side. And I know that that gets a lot of airtime already, but I think the actual in the weeds, just logistics of like my bandmates are some of my very best friends. I also am paying them historically not enough, like you're just like trying to do everything you can to build something so that you and your pals can keep doing this thing that you love, but you're in a car together for 3-4 weeks sometimes with no alone time, crashing on couches where cats are crawling all over you. Like, and you're, as a band leader, I'll lay there and be like, should I have gotten us an Airbnb? Like, I don't have the money. Should I have put it on a credit card? Just like trying to make the right decisions for like what's good for the business versus what's good for creativity, what's good for this collaborative adventure that we're all on. And generally, I have just opted to be super transparent and like actually ask my bandmates and, tell them what's going on, and they can tell me what they think or what they can and can't do. So that's been, I don't think it's been an unhealthy dynamic, but it has been totally hard behind the scenes to like figure out, because you just want to always do better for like the people you love. You want to, it's like, it's just this really tricky situation because it's really hard to make.
It's a lot of
money.
Pressure on you too.
Totally. Yeah. And you want to do a good job, but there's no one in the music business that's going to like pat you on the back and be like, you did a good job. You just have to be like,
yeah,
that worked. I don't know how.
You have to make decisions that you feel like you can live with too.
Yeah. And readjust. Like there's definitely been times as a band leader, I've been like, I was wrong and I'm sorry. Like you do the best you can on the forefront to like plan things, and then stuff goes wrong and you do your best then, but also you just have to like own up to the fact that you didn't get that one right.
Yes. And I think that's awesome that you're saying that. It goes into the transparency thing that you were saying earlier too, that if you can be at least somewhat transparent, not that you have to be completely transparent, there might be reasons to be and not to be at times, but having open dialogue, clear dialogue, then when mistakes are made, there's just going to be far more understanding than, if you pretend to have everything figured out and then a mistake is made. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it also is just important to work with people who can communicate. Like, I think that is something I see in friends who are working so hard to get a band together or trying to book their first tour, and they're maybe working with someone who's really talented, but just like isn't maybe being honest or forthcoming about where they're at. And that is so hard. Like, it's hard enough. Like, the logistics are so tricky. But if you have people in your project or that you're trying to collaborate with where it just doesn't happen easily, it's just like, oh my gosh, they might not be someone you can work with long term. Yeah. Because if you can't have clear communication, like, it's going to be such a headache. Yeah. It's going to be so hard.
Absolutely. From the struggles, those difficult things. What about like big breakthroughs and your big moments that you felt like, I'm doing it, I'm figuring it out?
Still waiting, I guess. I think the things that have been like big moments more than anything are like surreal as they're happening. Like, we had a song put on a really big playlist. We didn't know that. I was on tour with my bandmates. We had just played a house show to like maybe 6 people in Ohio. We were all like brushing our teeth at my friend's parents' house, and my phone was dinging. I was like getting notifications, and I was like, oh, this song is like, the plays are going up really fast. This is really weird. And I just have this memory of staying there with my bandmate Pat, brushing our teeth, watching it and being like, what? It was just weird. And then in the morning, like, emailed some people that I thought maybe had done that, and they were all like, no idea. And it was like, okay, we're just kind of watching it go up. And then like maybe 6 months later, I read an interview. They were interviewing a Spotify editorial playlist maker who was like, yeah, I heard this song by a band called Humbird. No idea who they are, but I liked it. I was like, it didn't feel like a moment, like a breakthrough moment. You're just watching it being like, that's nuts. Is that how that works? Like, that's crazy.
Sometimes.
Yeah, and it didn't we were on a tour at the time and I don't think it changed anything on the tour. It was like, well, get in the van and play tonight in another place. Hopefully people come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one other question I wanted to circle back to the recent transition of getting a manager, label, that sort of thing. Like, what are your hopes for that?
Yeah, my hopes are that it continues to just be this project that unfolds as it will. I've never been super interested in any mythology around making it big. I think if people are into that, they should move to LA or New York or Nashville.
Sure.
Go to where the other people are that want to do that also. They're all hanging out and you can go that route there. I feel like part of the power of living in the Midwest and being in a scene that feels so much more like an ecosystem than a hierarchy is you can do really interesting, weird things and take risks that you maybe couldn't in other places. So I just hope that there's a continued ability to do what feels right next. And now having more structural support than we used to, other good ideas. Like I said earlier, it's you just want to work with smart people who are good at their job and will have good ideas so that any idea I have or I'm excited about, I can be like, okay, here's what we're thinking. Here's where we're going. What do you have to contribute to how this could reach people or how this could engage with community or whatever goal there is. Yeah, just working with smart people to make it effective and sustainable. That's the goal.
Yeah. Well, what are your big goals? What's next? What's on the horizon?
We're in a funny place because we just put out this third record and I'm really proud of it.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways it feels like a big accomplishment to have done it. And lately I've been asking myself, what's next? What feels exciting next? And I'm kind of waiting for lightning to hit, but it hasn't yet.
The next stranger that you meet in that hotel lobby.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm kind of trying to keep space open in my mind for what could be next. And I don't know what it is yet.
We've got a big tour coming up in the fall, right?
Yeah. We'll be hitting the road again, doing some folk festivals and opening up for some folks, hopefully.
Cool. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer, and I feel like we covered a lot of really good information for people that are curious about what that looks like.
Yeah,
so thank you for sharing all of that. And
I hope it's helpful.
Before we kind of get to the ending, is there anything that you want to bring up? Anything that you feel like is worth saying to listeners, knowing that a lot of people that are listening are going to be in bands looking to try to get to where you are now?
I would just say that music is enough. It's enough. And you don't have to be anything other than someone who loves music and who loves making music. All that other stuff will come with time and with some elbow grease. But if the music you're making is the absolute best it can be, and you're always trying to become a better writer, become a better bandmate, become a better performer, I think magic can happen. And you're not going to end up in the place you imagined. And it's hopefully going to be way more interesting. But if the music is amazing and undeniable and people want to hear it and people stop, I just think there's music that makes people pause and think about their lives. And that's a actual fucking superpower to be able to do that for people. So the other stuff, it's stressful and it's hard and it takes a long time and it's work, but just not letting that ruin the magic. I think it's hard to do, but it's really important.
I sort of have a stand where I just feel yes, because I spend a lot of time talking about it on the podcast. Obviously there's a lot of business stuff that, gets focused on, but in studio too, there's a lot of conversation about marketing and tactics and stuff like that. And, it's a part of it. But yeah, I've always sort of had a stand where it's it doesn't matter if anybody hears it or not. Doing it is the point.
Yeah.
And that alone should be worth it. And if it isn't for you, then it's probably not the right fit. It just, to some extent, you have to be okay just making it, even if no one hears it. If that's where you're at, then the decision's already made. You can do that. Now, sometimes people make amazing music that has that power, but they just don't get enough people to hear it in the first place, and that can be really frustrating. And so that's what, hopefully we're helping with along the way with some of these stories and insights of stuff of like encouraging some of the elbow grease, because it is also easy to just ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
totally.
that's not a good idea either. You know, sometimes we can look at people that get discovered or have these amazing opportunities that just kind of come out of the ether and go, that's what I'm waiting for. And hopefully that does happen for everybody that wants it to, but clearly it won't.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there has to be an in-between too. But I agree with you in that it's too important to the world to make it about having everybody hear it. And I think we do it a disservice if it becomes solely about that, because I'm sure you can think of scenarios, whether it was shows or records that you've listened to or been present at that you know no one else knows about, but they just changed you.
Yeah. They're like little gems you get to keep on the inside.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. There's some sadness in that, like, it's too bad that no one else gets that, but it's special to us.
Yeah.
That did have
or
that
sometimes
experience.
it feels you're like, I just got that, like, just for me and my friend that was here. Like, it can feel
And that's
so
what I mean. It's just
special.
too important. Yes, it can be hard if it doesn't turn out to be all the things you want it to be, but you know, first and foremost, it's got to be something that you're going to do regardless. And then add on the other stuff as you can.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you bring that up, because in all of the conversation about, you know, how to get to the next step, you can't forget the fact that the music has to be fantastic.
Yeah.
It has to be able to stop people, and people have to want to talk about it without you doing anything at all. Because if that's not there, no amount of business is going to help you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and it's the best. It's so much more fun than the music part or the business part.
Totally. You know, maybe that is going to be your answer to this next question, but I'll ask it anyways, because at the end of every interview, I ask people, you know, the podcast is called Secrets from the Scene. So I ask them if you want to pass along a secret, something that you've learned. And I always frame it as something you'd want your younger self to know. Like maybe before Pharmacon came out, what would be something that'd be just critical for you to know before all of that happened?
I think that the secret from the scene I'll share is that this scene in the Twin Cities is really special. And I've spent a lot of time in other scenes and traveling around and playing places. And there's, you know, infinite cool places to go and cool people to meet and cool scenes unfolding. But I have come back here time and time again for a reason. And that's because I think there's something really special here in the Twin Cities. And I'm not talking about liking each other's social media posts. I'm talking about going to the 331 on Sundays and seeing who Mikkel Beckman has invited to play with him on stage. I'm talking about, going to that Ice House patio show of a local band that you've never heard of just to find out what they're doing. There's amazing jazz music going on. There's so many genres that you can't even keep track of here in Minneapolis or in the Twin Cities. And I just feel like that's the secret. Like, we have the secret right here, and it's going on, and it can be better if you're showing up for it too. And I just want to say, as someone who's done a lot of miles, seeing a lot of other places, like, this place is a really cool secret that we all have access to.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's special.
Yeah.
You know, I put out a podcast episode every week with a guest, and, you know, that's a lot of guests.
Yeah.
But the spreadsheet list I have of people every time I, you know, ask for referrals and stuff, like, I'm not going to run out anytime soon.
Yeah.
And I look at this list and I'm like, there's some insanely talented people on here. I have no idea when I'm going to get to them.
Yeah.
You know, this could take years. I'll run out of juice before that happens. You know, there's just so many people doing amazing stuff here on all sides of the industry too. And so just get out there, be a part of that magic and keep it alive. And that's ultimately where some of the best opportunities come from.
Yeah.
It's where you can learn so much from, and it'll hopefully, you know, if you're doing it right, recharge you too.
Yeah.
And provide for better and better ideas, better music, better creativity. Well, if people want to follow you, check out a show, whatever, where would you like to send people?
Well, humbirdmusic.com has all the stuff kind of in one place, but on social media platforms, it's Humbird. Usually it should be that. And I do my best on those platforms. No promises. But yeah, things are like tour dates are listed on the website and there's links to all the music. So
Great. I'll include that in the show notes. Siri, thanks once again for doing
thanks
this.
for having me, Steven.
This was awesome.
This was fun.
For everybody listening, thank you so much for coming back or for checking this out. If it's your first time, if you enjoyed it, please share it with a friend. Invite some more people to be part of this sort of community as well, and check out a live show. Until next time.